All right, here we are. It's Tuesday, March 17th, 2020. We recorded the live stream at night. We put the podcast out in the morning, and it's welcome to the pandemic, folks, right? We're right in the middle of it. we talked about it last week. Things were just starting to bubble up. We had a special live stream we ran on, I don't even remember, Thursday or Friday, when we were talking about things being canceled and how everything in the world had been canceled, and now I think we're fully in it now. We're all kind of fully adapting to this new world and adjusting to the kind of the new way of things here and wherever you are. We're here in Pittsburgh. You might be in Pittsburgh as well. You might be anywhere, but it's affecting you no matter where you are. But we are going to soldier on here on the Panther-Lair podcast, certainly on Panther-Lair.com. This live stream, hope everybody's able to check into it. Got some people already joining, and we appreciate that. Get in the comment section there and offer your input, your feedback, your reactions, your thoughts, your questions, your comments, what have you about Pitt sports. We obviously have a lot to talk about in that regard. But it's interesting to me, and I was thinking about this today. I mean, I wasn't just thinking about this today. I've been thinking about this quite a bit, that, everywhere I look, I read on Twitter, or Facebook, or anywhere I hear sports people talking, there's this feeling that there's nothing going on, that it's just this dead time. And I see people, other sports writers, talking about how they're, what shows should I binge watch? And I'm going to read books now, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. I mean, first of all, you guys should have been reading books anyway. No matter how difficult or how packed your schedule is with sporting events, you could cover 15 different things. You should still have time to read a book. Oh, I'm on the road all the time. Being on the road is the best time to read. I read more. The trip to El Paso, I read like 2 books on that trip. I mean, I finished one and read almost all of another. I mean, being on the road is the best time to read, because you're just in a hotel room by yourself. You get your work done. You have nothing else to do. You have no obligations to anyone else. You can just read. So you should have been reading books all along. But I see, sports writers in particular, and bloggers talking about, I had all this free time to do. What am I going to do with all this free time? There's, nothing going on. And to a large extent, it's true in the sports world. Look, the NBA's season is postponed. NHL's season is postponed. Major League Baseball spring training postponed. Opening day pushed back. March Madness is canceled. Spring football is canceled. I mean, there has been a lot in the world of sports that's going to. There's a lot in the world of sports that is not happening. There's no question about that. But at the same time, it's not completely dead, particularly if you do what I do. I mean, recruiting is still happening. We saw that on Tuesday night when Jeff Cable got a commitment from a guard who's going to come in and play for Pitt in 2020. We see that where Pitt is still, the football staff is putting out new scholarship offers. I mean, recruiting is still happening. There's still things to talk about. There's still things to write about. And certainly we are on Panther-Lair.com. And this isn't just a plug for the site, but I mean, obviously, if you're a Pitt fan, you should be checking out the site, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news. And that hasn't stopped. Even if there's a pandemic. Pandemics are not going to stop Panther-Lair.com. We're still 3, 4, 5 articles a day. I mean, we're still pumping that content out. There's still discussions on the message board. But what's interesting to me, and like I say, this wasn't just a plug for the site. What's interesting to me is that it's not that there's nothing to talk about. It's not that there's nothing to write about. It's just sometimes, in the wake of everything that's going on, or should I say in the shadow of everything that's going on, because wake sort of implies that it's something that's already happened. I mean, it's happening. We're in the shadow of this situation. In the shadow of this situation, sometimes it's hard to really care. I mean, I want to get into discussions on the message boards about, is Pitt's O-line going to be better in 2020? Or what did we learn from spring camp? Or, like even some of the comments already coming in here on the live stream about Pitt's roster makeup for basketball. Is this guy going to stay? Is this guy going to go? And one guy did go this week, and one guy said he's not going to go, and they got another commitment. And these are all things that are of great interest, and I want to talk about them. And there are times when I do want to talk about them, and there are times I am engaged about it. And I think you probably feel the same way, that there are also times you just don't care. Like you can scroll through Twitter and get into a conversation about Audi's Tony or Gabe Hoy, but you're probably going to get distracted by the latest death tolls out of Italy, or new cases in Allegheny County. And sometimes it's hard to regain that focus on Pitt sports or any sports when you've got everything else going on. And I think that was especially true. I don't know. Maybe it's just, the people I follow on Twitter. I mean, you have NFL free agency right now. You have Tom Brady going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And it was a big deal, and a big deal was made of it. And, Stephon Diggs getting traded and DeAndre Hopkins and that mess with Houston and the Cardinals. And I mean, like, all these things, a big deal was made of them, but was it as big as it would have been if there wasn't this huge shadow of something else that starts with hanging over us? And I'm not sure if it is. I'm not sure if it's as impactful as it would have been under different circumstances. So, I mean, there are things happening. There are things to talk about. There are things to write about, but it's just hard to prioritize them or make them feel like the most important thing. Of course, we always have the cold ones. Goose Island tonight. Goose Island Solo is the name of the drink. It's a 98 calorie IPA. And it's not bad. It's pretty light. I like it. It's easy to drink. 3% alcohol. The one thing about these, and maybe this is just the batch that I got, but if you get these, be careful. Okay? I started this one a little bit earlier, and I have a backup on hand, but it's not another one of the same thing because I can't open this at my desk because every one I've opened explodes. Not actually explodes. It just overflows. I have to do it over the sink, or else I'm going to have a giant mess everywhere. So I do like this beer. It's easy to drink. I think Goose Island generally makes good things. It goes down easy, but, I'd rather they don't explode. Hopefully that's just the batch I got. Hopefully you go out and get some Solo and enjoy it and don't have it go all over the place. Because it's good. All right, let's talk about some Pitt basketball news that came out this week. Start earlier. I say this week and earlier in the week. It's freaking Tuesday, man. Is this happening to you too? That just you lose track of what day it is and where you are in the week? I mean, it's Tuesday. I feel like it's like Thursday or Friday. I know we do this live stream on Tuesday night. I know I record the podcast on Tuesday night. I should not be confused about this. So often my week is defined by sort of the work responsibility, or the days of the week are defined by the work responsibilities of, okay, well, I got the podcast on Tuesday night. I got, when there's practice or there's different media opportunities, during the season. Oh, we got Narduzzi on Thursday we got to go to, and I have to have the column done by Friday, and, radio show prepared for Saturday. I mean, my week is sort of defined by work responsibilities, but this week it's all still jumbled up, It's only Tuesday. So when I say earlier in the week, Ryan Murphy announced that he's going to leave Pitt as a graduate transfer. That might have been yesterday. I don't even know. When was it? Yesterday? Monday? Sunday? Something like that. It wasn't that much further away. It wasn't that long ago. But Ryan Murphy announced he's going to go as a grad transfer. He's going to leave Pitt. Not a terrible shock. I think when we talked about potential departures from the roster, potential attrition, his name got up. You hate to speculate on guys who might leave. You hate to transfer guys when they haven't transferred. I feel the same way about, you hate to fire coaches when they haven't been fired. Assistant coaches, coordinators, even head coaches. You try not to go too far down the road of speculation just for a number of reasons. But, his was a name that if you were going to put together a list of guys who would potentially leave the program early, he would be on that list, in addition to, the Samson George, which, again, I was disappointed that Samson George didn't stick around. I was hoping he would go a full 4 years, 5 years, whatever it is, with never really making a contribution, but just show some resiliency and just stay with the program all the way through. Well, he ends up, he left early. Ken Chukwuka, I think, could have had another year, but he's done. He never played this year after having surgery. Obviously, Eric Hamilton off the books. They had one open spot, and then now you add Ryan Murphy to it. So they ended up with 5 open scholarship spots going forward. And, that's the big impact of Ryan Murphy coming off the roster. Although, Murphy, I think, had a role that he filled better early in the season. I think the real split in Ryan Murphy's season at Pitt was pre-concussion and post-concussion. I mean, I think when he got hurt, it was in a practice, I think prior to the first Miami game, maybe the second Miami game. I forget exactly when it happened. And he missed a couple games, and when he came back, he just wasn't right. I think he made 3 3-pointers for the rest of the season. Shot 17% or something terrible. He was better earlier in the season. I think before he got hurt, he was averaging 10 points per game. I mean, he had a role, and there were times where I didn't think he was necessarily comfortable in that role, or maybe not comfortable. Maybe comfortable is not the word, but I thought there were times where he was not willing to accept that role and play that role. He was trying to do things that were maybe out of his skill set, trying to drive. Your job is not to drive. Your job is to catch and shoot. When you get the ball, if you have an inch of daylight, it should be going. You know what I mean? When you catch a pass, the ball should be going to the hoop more often than not. And I didn't know if he always embraced that role, at least through his play. I can't say what his mindset actually was, but I mean, when you watched him play and what he was trying to do and how just his decisions on the court, I don't know if you were ever really, I was never really sold that he was sold on filling that role, but I mean, that's what he was brought to Pitt to do, was to shoot 3-pointers. And then when that became not a strong suit, when that became not a strong suit for him, particularly after the concussion, then you hate to say something callous, like his usefulness, faded, but kind of. Yeah, Roman says, he pump fake too much. And I mean, that's exactly right. Roman in the comments says, that Ryan Murphy pump fake too much. And it's true. I mean, you're not Sam Young. Nobody's worried about you blowing by them, and even if they do jump on your pump fake, they can still defend you because you're not quick enough to get around them, So he comes off the roster. And again, I mean, I think you could kind of see that one coming. It leaves a little bit of a hole in 3-point shooting, although there again, that sort of waned as the season went on, and he wasn't nearly as effective in that role. So, you don't want to, like I say, you don't want to be too callous about the situation. Josh Newark says no ill will towards Ryan Murphy, but it's not really a loss for Pitt. 4 teams in 5 years, correct. Yeah, he's bounced around. He started out at, Charlotte, or someplace like that, and then he went into a junior college, and then he's at Pitt, and now he's going to go somewhere else for his final year. And I mean, best of luck to him. He seemed like a nice kid. He was entertaining. He had some good quotes. He had a line about, he was balding and looked like a frat boy and all this kind of stuff. But he was a nice guy. Best of luck to him. But he probably made the best decision for him, and what ultimately might end up being the best decision for Pitt, because when you add him in with, Eric Hamilton, Kenny Chukwuka, Samson George, and then that one open spot that Pitt had all season, you've now got room for 5 guys. And I'm not talking about burgers. Sorry. You've got room to bring in 5 new players on scholarship. And that's really the big impact of this situation and Ryan Murphy's decision to go is that it opens up that scholarship spot. So they already had 3 commitments: John Hugley, Noah Collier, Max Madison, all kind of forwards, post players. Hugley probably like a center, and Collier and Madison more forwards. And that helps with the depth up front, but you need help in the backcourt. And they got it on Tuesday. Femi Odukali, I apologize if I mispronounce his name. Young man out of New York City, a guard, a wing player, can play point guard, shooting guard, even a small forward. He's like 6'5", big wingspan. Everybody's talking about his wingspan. He's got wingspan. We've been out there measuring his arms. Well, we haven't measured his arms, but somebody's measured his arms, and they've told us what his arms are. And if there's anything I believe, it's what coaches tell us guys' arms measure. It's right up there with 40 times and, heights and weights and things like that. No, but I mean, the really intriguing prospect. Seems to have had a great senior year, post-grad year actually, as it were. Improved his 3-point shooting, became a bit of a threat out there, was almost 40% from outside the arc. And he's going to come in and provide more depth to really kind of shore up the backcourt, which is, if you watched Pitt this year, they needed depth everywhere. They needed depth in the front court and the backcourt, and they seem to have some of that recruiting help up front with Hugley and Collier and Madison, but they needed it in the backcourt, and now they've got a piece with Femi. A few thoughts there. When you look at the depth going forward, now this is subject to change because Ryan Murphy transferred out, went in the transfer portal as a grad transfer. There's potential that more guys could go, or another guy or two could go. But as it stands right now, when you look at it, you've got Pitt projected to have 4 guards, scholarship guys: Xavier Johnson, Trey McGowan, Ethiel Horton, and Femi Udikali. And again, I apologize if I mispronounce that. You watch videos, but you watch them with the sound off and always forget to look at them before you have to actually talk about the guys. Forwards, you got Justin Champagnie, Audis Toney, Gerald Drumgoole, Maxim Madison, Noah Collier, the 2 freshmen there. And then centers, you got Terrell Brown, Abdul Kareem Koulibaly, and John Hugley. And this is assuming everybody comes back, and you've seen rumors about everybody on that list, almost all the returning guys, right? I mean, we've seen at different times people have rumored or speculated, and not necessarily with substantial rumors, but rumored or speculated Xavier Johnson, Trey McGowan, Justin Champagnie, Audis Toney, Terrell Brown. Champagnie maybe a little less than others, which made it funny that he made a statement about how he's coming back, although that might have just been a, looking forward to year 2 type of thing. But I never really thought Champagnie was going anywhere. I mean, like I say, I don't get into too much of the public speculation. But when it comes to guys that, if you would ask me to circle a few names of guys that I might speculate on, I don't think he would have been on that list. Some of the others, some yes, some no. But as it stands right now, that's what the roster looks like. And I thought it was interesting that Xavier Johnson felt the need to make a statement about his future, about his decision, or about where he's going to be playing basketball next year. And he came out with, a tweet. Again, it might have been Sunday, it might have been Monday. I forget what day it was. They're all blurring together, like I said. And he said, I'm not going anywhere. I came here to the Pittsburgh, with a mission. I'm going to, I came here to leave a legacy. I'm not going anywhere. And I thought that was interesting because I thought, would you make that statement if you weren't making a decision? You know what I mean? If it was just an automatic for you, you wouldn't really feel a need to make a statement like that. But then he also had a part in his tweet about, please stop contacting my friends and family and asking about this. And it made a lot more sense to me because this is where we are right now. This is kind of our, I don't know what you want to call it, our media age. And that we all want to have a story, right? We all, and I'm talking about we all, I'm saying like media, journalists, reporters, bloggers, somebody who sets up a Twitter account and uses it to contact recruits. I mean, that passes for reporting these days. We all want to break a big story. And what would be a bigger story than the point guard transferring? And so you reach out to him, you badger him with questions, asking about this. You don't get any response, so you start going elsewhere. You start finding his parents. You start finding his family. You start finding friends, and you send them all Twitter messages when there's no real substantial rumor to go off of. I mean, some situations there was a bit of a substantial rumor, but there was no substantial rumor with Xavier Johnson. Why are we bothering him, bothering his friends, bothering his family to the point where he feels like he needs to put out a statement to say, just leave me alone. I'm not going anywhere. That's a diatribe. It's a digression on another topic. But, just because you have a Twitter account and somebody has open DMs doesn't mean you need to send that person a direct message and ask them a question that may or may not actually need to be answered. And I mean, I'm not going to pretend like I'm not guilty of reaching out to guys and saying, hey, are you thinking of transferring here, or are you thinking of leaving? But usually at least there's something substantial to go on. A substantial rumor, a substantial, something. And I don't think that ever really existed with Xavier Johnson. But he goes out and says it. He's not going anywhere. He's definitely coming back. We haven't heard the same thing from Trey McGowan, and I I mean, that's his prerogative on what he wants to say. I don't know what he's choosing to do for next season. I mean, that's another name that, he's been speculated. Is it a substantial rumor? I don't know. It's speculation is the most that I've seen. Some of it based on body language, some of it based on comments from players and coaches and, about a number of things. I'm going to guess that Trey McGowan's and his friends and family are getting hit with a barrage of direct messages and contact as well. And, to this point, haven't really heard anything from McGowan's. I don't know what he's going to do. Would it surprise me if Trey McGowan's ultimately decided to leave and go somewhere else for the next 2 years? I can't say it would. I don't know if he's entirely happy with his role at Pitt. Although I think he's been a major contributor since he got to Pitt. I think he's been a big piece of the puzzle since he got to Pitt. And I don't think he could complain about his minutes or his shots or what he's been asked to do at Pitt. But if he feels like he could be used in a different way or used better or contribute more, well, then perhaps he'll look elsewhere. And then your depth in the backcourt gets a little bit thinner. Then you're with Xavier Johnson and Ethio Horton and Femi Udikali. If I'm going to mispronounce it, I'm going to be consistent in how I mispronounce it. Not, say it different ways so I know I'm wrong some of the time. And also Gerald Drumgoole, I guess, could potentially swing in there at the 2. You could have him as a backup off-ball guard. You're going to be a little light. I think your ideal backcourt next season would be Johnson, McGowan's, Horton, and Femi. But, if you lose a piece from that, it's going to hurt your depth pretty significantly, which is largely the situation they were in this year, where they pretty much had 3 scholarship guards, where they had McGowan's, Johnson, and Ryan Murphy. Now you would just sub out Murphy for Horton, and I think the ideal was to sub out Murphy for Horton and bring in a freshman to go with it, and kind of fill it out with a nice 4-man rotation at the 2 guard spots, and that's a luxury Pitt may or may not have. We'll have to see kind of how it develops over time. But, as you look at the roster construction right now, I think there's a fair amount to like. Let's say that everybody is still there. Everybody who's there now comes back. Let's say there's no more transfers. Let's say that Terrell Brown sticks and McGowan sticks and Tony sticks and all these guys that we haven't heard from. They all stick, and all the freshmen come in and they all make it. They all qualify. Let's assume no more bumps in the road. And let's even we'll get to that. We'll get to that 13 scholarship spot in a second. Let's assume there are no more bumps in the road. Right? And everything is just status quo from here on out. And let's assume they actually play college basketball in the fall. Because, as somebody pointed out in the comments, who knows how long things could... Yeah, let's not get down that road. I think you have a pretty good roster right there. To run those 4 guys out there at guard, to have Champagny and Tony playing a lot of minutes. I think Drumgoole gets a lot better as a sophomore, and then you see what you get out of the freshmen of Madison and Collier. I think Brown and Coulibaly make a nice duo at center. I think Coulibaly has a chance to take a real leap from freshman to sophomore year, and then Hugley kind of works in wherever he figures in to the mix. You saw Coulibaly get a decent amount of minutes as a freshman down the stretch this season. I think Hugley could earn himself some playing time. And then, that's a roster that should win more than this year's did. I think it looks like a better roster than what they had this year. That's assuming that everybody comes back, which is an assumption we may or may not be able to make. But that's, I don't know. I think you'd have to like the makeup of the roster right now. I think you'd have to like how it looks. All right, we'll roll through a few of the comments here. As we look at the live stream, because I like this part of doing the live stream, particularly before we switch to any other topics. I like doing this live stream because it gives you a chance to interact. It's not sports talk radio, but it's a chance to kind of share some comments, share some questions, and like I say, interact, talk back. So go back to the beginning of the podcast. Brock Madanik says, do you think McGowan's will stay? It just doesn't make sense to me why everyone thinks he's going to leave. And I hear you, Brock. I think every individual person has their own personality and their own perspective on things. And McGowan's will have to make the best decision for himself. But yeah, look, he's got a role as a prominently featured scoring guard on an ACC program. That's a pretty good place to be. I could see why you would say it doesn't make sense to you why everyone thinks he's going to leave. I mean, he's an interesting guy to me. I think, Trey McGowan's, he's come across as shy. He's come across as sometimes maybe doubting himself a little bit. I mean, it's just talking in press conferences and that kind of thing. He's come across as a pretty interesting guy who I think maybe he's even a little bit introverted, maybe. But I think he probably, I don't know. I think there's a lot more under the surface than we see or know about, which is the case with almost all of these guys. Almost every college athlete, we all try and pretend like we know or know something about them. We don't, you know what I mean? We don't know who they are really. We just know them through some of the public interactions that we get. But I think McGowan's is an interesting guy, and we'll see what he's able to, we'll see what decision he makes. And I think there is a decision for him to make this offseason. Josh Newark, we honestly don't know if this virus leaves in time for football and basketball. Unfortunately, this is life or death for people. Yeah, I mean, look, every day something new, it seems like something new gets canceled. So every day something new changes. Every day, every day there's a further reinforcement of the fact that we just don't know. We don't know anything. And as long as that continues, I mean, I don't think you can... I keep trying to think that I can make some tentative plans into the summer. I don't know. We're going to the Outer Banks in June or something, Is that trip going to happen? There's more than 10 of us in the house. So I have to say that I'm really not sure. And that's June. I don't know about July. I don't know about August. Am I going to buy baseball tickets to a game in July or August? I mean, I wonder if you can even buy baseball tickets right now. We've reached the point where we all know that we don't know, that this is very much TBD on almost everything. So, all right, get more questions here. Number 2, the Elysian Contact Hazy IPA from Elysian. This is actually my last one I have of these. That's good. It's an abrupt change from the Solo. From Goose Island, it's a lot more flavorful. But, the Elysian Contact Haze, that's a good one. I recommend that one as well. If you like hazy IPAs, I think it's a pretty good hazy IPA. S. Mac is in the comments and asks, are we the front runners for William Jeffress? And that's an interesting one because you've got that 13th scholarship spot hanging out there now. Just as it is. They don't need any more attrition to get a guy like Will Jeffress. They don't need another spot to open up to bring him in. And I kept thinking that they needed one more spot because I felt like they were recruiting 2 more guys and they only had room for one. I thought they were trying to get Jeffress, who's the 4-star forward from Erie, and then they were trying to get Femi, who they got a commitment from on Tuesday. I thought they needed more attrition to fit both of those guys, but they don't. You know what I mean? When you add it all up, you've got 8 guys slated to come back. You've got 4 recruits coming in. That leaves 1 scholarship spot, which means they can still get Will Jeffress without needing anyone else to leave. That doesn't necessarily mean there won't be further attrition, but it's good to be in a position where you don't need attrition to happen in order to get the recruits and have room for the recruits that you want to sign. So that's a good situation. I do think they're in really good shape with William Jeffress. He's a younger guy. I'm not sure what his contributions will be as a freshman in college, but I think he's got a really bright future, a really high ceiling, and a ton of potential. I think they're in good shape with him. This whole emergency dead period from the NCAA, which canceled spring recruiting, so recruits can't go out and visit colleges, and college coaches can't go visit recruits. This has thrown a wrench into things because Jeffress hasn't taken any official visits yet. He's been on a lot of unofficial visits, including he's been to Pitt a bunch of times, and he's certainly had a lot of interaction and contact with Jeff Capel, but he was not going to be able to take any official visits. Now, I was saying, he won't be able to take any official visits, before the signing period. We don't even know when the signing period is going to happen. Here again, we come back to the uncertainty of things. We don't know anything, really. We don't know when these things are going to happen. We don't know when the signing period is going to come back. We don't know when the emergency dead period is going to end, or if it's going to end, or if it's just going to extend into the summer. So many things are up in the air, and if you're a kid like William Jeffress, you've got to try and decide. I mean, you're going to reach a point in the next 2 months where you have to decide, do I know where I want to go? Even if this emergency dead period extends, because the letter of intent signing period, it's important, but it kind of isn't. If you want to go to a school, you can just go, right? So like a kid like William Jeffress, right? He doesn't need to sign a national letter of intent to be able to go to Pitt or whatever college. You can just enroll and be on scholarship. I don't think you need to actually sign. You don't need to actually sign. It's a lot of pomp and circumstance, and it's a ceremony, and it kind of locks the school into committing a scholarship spot to you and all those things, and it's legally binding and all that, even though we've seen guys get out of it. You don't actually have to do it. So the signing period doesn't matter. What's relevant for a guy like William Jeffress is being able to take visits and going out and seeing the schools. I mean, he's talking about wanting to check out Stanford. He's never been to Stanford. He probably wants to take an official visit to Pitt. He probably would like to see these places. You've got an opportunity to take a lot of official visits. You might as well do it, But he's also been on a lot of unofficial visits. He's seen a lot of college campuses. He's interacted with a lot of college coaches. He's spent a lot of time around these people, and he can FaceTime with coaches, and you can learn a lot about a college online. You can learn a lot about a college through virtual interactions and virtual tours. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect substitute, but if you really want to get it done, you really want to go to college in the summer, you don't need to, you can make sacrifices. And if that sacrifice is not taking as many official visits as you wanted to, I mean, so be it. And that may be the situation that William Jeffress finds himself in. And like I said, I was thinking, if the emergency dead period, does it end in time for the signing period, or does it end in time for this or that? I mean, like, national letter of intent, it's just that part doesn't matter. If you know where you want to go and they're willing to have a scholarship spot for you, and it's different in football than it is in basketball because, particularly this spring signing period is closer to the summer when kids would enroll, as opposed to football, and there are more numbers to deal with in football and that kind of thing. I think if William Jeffress wants to go to Pitt, he's going to have a spot to do it. And I mean, they have one open scholarship spot. And so, I'm less concerned about signing day than I am about those visits. And that's going to, it could very well come to a point where Jeffress and his family have to make a decision on, okay, how important is it to take these official visits? Because if it's not that important and you know where you want to go, which, I mean, Pitt would certainly fit the bill, I think, then you'll be okay. But if it's really important to you and you want to make sure that you live through, live the full experience of being recruited and official visits and all those things, then I don't know. I mean, you're faced with a tough decision, and maybe you end up putting it off. Remember, he reclassified to the class of 2020. And I got to think, and he hasn't said this, his family hasn't said this, but I mean, to some extent, that's got to be on the table if you are not able to go out on the road and you really want to make these visits. So it's a unique situation. It's kind of, I don't know. I don't really know what I don't know what's going to happen there. I think Pitt's in really good shape for William Jeffress. I know he likes them a lot, but I don't know. I don't know what it's going to be. Let's see. In the comments section here, Cameron G says, "Hey, Chris, any idea what the expectation should be for next year with our roster as it stands?" And Roman replied, "NIT or bust." Yeah, I mean, I think, look, if you get all 8 of these guys back, plus the 4 freshmen coming in and add Jeffress, then yeah, you need to be in a postseason tournament. I think you need to do better than 6 conference wins. I think you need to really be pushing 500 in the ACC. Whether 10-10, 9-11, 11-9, something. You need to be around that mark, and I think you need to. You need to shoot for that, because when you're going to have McGowan's and Johnson and Tony as juniors and Brown as a senior and Champagnie as a sophomore and Koulibaly as a sophomore, I mean, you've got a little more depth in the backcourt. You're going to have some more depth in the front court. I think you really have to. You need to make a postseason tournament. I think. Let me see here. Dale Gribble says Trey McGowan's might be the best player Pitt has. Well, I don't know, Dale. I think most people would probably, particularly after the way the season ended and the way he played kind of down the stretch, and the he I'm referring to is not McGowan's, but I think Justin Champagnie is probably the one that most Pitt fans would I think Justin Champagnie is probably the player most Pitt fans would say is the best player on the team, and I think you can make it. I don't know if I would. It's tricky. It's tricky. See, I was just about to say, I think you can make a good case for it, but then the more I think about it, I don't know if he really was the best player on the team this year, but then I don't know who I would pick above him. I mean, Champagnie had a lot of great moments, and he had a lot of great games, but he also, he was inconsistent. He had a lot of games where he didn't shoot very well. He had a lot of games where the three-point shot wasn't falling. Now, the thing, he was not inconsistent with his energy, with his effort. His rebounding numbers back that up. I think so much of rebounding can be effort and energy and just how hard you're willing to work. And, Champagnie led the team in rebounds. He was, sorry, I had to hop the chair back a little bit. If you saw that on the live screen, you see me bounce around. Champagnie's energy and effort never waned. He was always good for that. And I think, I don't know if you would say that about every guy on the team. I think Audice Tony had energy and effort every night. And I'm not going to go down the road of the energy and effort thing. I've talked about that way too much probably. But, who was the best player on the team this year? I don't really know. I don't feel like anybody was consistent enough that there's an easy answer. You want to say Champagnie? Okay, I'm not going to argue with you too much. Yeah, I think at times it was Audice Tony. I think in certain games it was Xavier Johnson. In some games it was Trey McGowan. I don't know. I don't know what the easy answer is there. If you have an answer, if you feel like there's an easy, obvious answer to Pitt's best player this past season, tell me, because I feel like the team and the individuals were way too inconsistent to just nail that down. But I'd like to hear what you say about that. Colin Towle, if Jeffress commits, do you think Gerald Drumgoole would think about transferring? I can't. I'm not in Gerald Drumgoole's head. I don't know what he's thinking. From my outside perspective, I would say no, because I don't know if Jeffress is going to come in and physically be ready to play, huge minutes as a freshman. I think he comes in, I think he's talented, and maybe he does get on the court some as a freshman, but I think Gerald Drumgoole, I think Gerald Drumgoole could be the guy who shocks a lot of people next year. I think he's a talented player. I really do. I don't think we saw much of that this year, but I think, to some extent, some of it was due to earlier in the season, he was a freshman. Well, he's a freshman all year long, but early in the season, he's getting used to the college game, and then he got hurt and missed a bunch of time, and all that time he was not developing. You know what I mean? All that time he was not getting comfortable on the court. Now, once he got back, he never really got that comfortable, but I'm willing to give him a pass on his freshman season due to that injury. I really am. And I'm willing to wait and see what he does as a sophomore. And maybe he'll be terrible as a sophomore. Maybe he won't actually make any improvements, and maybe he will, lose playing time to guys like Drumgoole. Maybe. Or Jeffress. But I'm willing to wait and see. I'm willing to give him a chance and let him play another season before I entirely write him off. And I think, Jeffress comes in and probably doesn't play starter minutes as a freshman. And probably, I wouldn't be surprised to see Drumgoole get more minutes than him when Jeffress is a freshman and Drumgoole is a sophomore. And maybe not. Maybe it goes the other way, and then, yeah, that might precipitate a move by Gerald Drumgoole. But, yeah, I'm not quite writing it off just yet. See if we got any comments here. Let me see. Nobody's, let's see. I'm looking through the comments in the live stream here, and like I say, it's part of the fun. Nobody's really chiming in on who they think was the best player on the team. Dale Gribble says he was initially the one who said that Trey McGowan was the best player on the team, and he says Justin Champagnie was only good for a few weeks. Trey McGowan has been playing for 2 years. Yeah, but not consistently and not very well. And there were definitely significant stretches of this past season where Champagnie was better than McGowan. There were stretches this season where Champagnie was the best player on the team. And some of those stretches were pretty recent, which helps, in that whole recency bias thing. Royce Beacom says the fatigue factor kept any one of the starters from becoming the best player. And I think I tend to agree with that, Royce. I think you might, there might be some truth there. We probably all undersold the fatigue factor, down the stretch. I didn't pay it much credence because, so, I mean, there's a few things about fatigue. I'm older than all these guys who are playing. I'm twice the age of most of these guys who play for Pitt. Almost all of them. I'm twice as old as they are, and so in my mind, they have endless, boundless energy, and can play 40 minutes of basketball day after day after day, and part of that is my own perception because I'm old and get tired quick. Part of it is I can remember Jamie Dixon talking about, they would play in a tournament where they would play like consecutive days or something like that. Big East tournament, they would get play in one of the early days or something like that. And, he would get asked about, guys playing back-to-back days. And he would always kind of like brush it off and say, you know what? They're young. They played AAU where they would play 2 or 3 games in a day for 3 days in a row. They can handle this. It's not going to wear them down. And so I never really thought too much about fatigue with this team down the stretch. And I read all this stuff about the schedule, and I heard about how they had this schedule or that schedule, or they didn't have a bye like every other team, and et cetera, et cetera. And I just didn't think about it. I just didn't care. So I was like, you guys are young. You get a couple days off between games. You should be fine. Like, what's the problem? It's 40 minutes. Get out there and run up and down the court. And I really, like I said, I paid it no mind. I thought it was excuse making for a team that had a lot of problems and a lot of issues, and that element, that factor of fatigue, I thought was pretty far down the list of issues that were actually affecting the team. Then, as Josh Newark points out in the comments, then they had that first game in the ACC tournament where they actually had a break and had a few days off, where they could get their legs back under them a little bit. And it was one of the best games they played all season. Maybe their best game against an ACC opponent, maybe their best game of the whole year. I mean, they were great against Wake Forest in that game. And I thought, maybe there was something to it. And Jeff Capel kind of talked about it. I think Jeff Capel didn't want it to be an excuse. I think Jeff Capel didn't want it to be, putting blame on something, to say that there was a fatigue factor or something like that. I think he wanted to avoid that because he felt like he would be making excuses. But he would talk about it every now and then. He would hint at it a little bit. And then, I think when you see how they played in the ACC tournament, I don't know. Maybe there was something to it. Let me see. Stephen Case says, mental fatigue from school for a young team, no game breaks, time to catch their breath with school. School is probably a factor we don't talk about enough with college athletics. College athletics, and we don't really talk about school enough. And kind of in a broader, not to go too far down this road, but I've talked about it different times when we will discuss rankings or evaluations, and where the rankings get something wrong or they get it right, and the evaluations get it right or they get it wrong, and the projections don't work out the way we project a guy as a 4-star or 5-star and he doesn't pan out, or a 3-star and he's a bust, or gets in trouble or something like that. And I think one of the things that I've often talked about, and I'm not saying it's necessarily a factor with this Pitt basketball team, but I think it is something we should probably all keep in mind a little more than we do, is we can project how big a guy is going to get. We can project how fast he's going to be. We can project how well he's going to learn college offense, college defense, learn and understand the game of college basketball. We can project all those things and have a lot of kind of tangible, quantifiable factors to consider when we make those projections. There's a lot of data we can look at. But one thing we'll never really be able to project, or one thing that'll be really difficult to project, because I think it's almost impossible to project with anyone, let alone a student athlete, is how they adapt to being in college. Not necessarily being in college as an athlete, but just being in college. Because college is weird, man. College is wild. You get to college and you have freedom that you've never had before. I mean, for the vast majority of kids who go to college, you have freedom that you never had before. The responsibility that you've never had before. And you can learn whether or not, you find out if you're going to take that responsibility on or how you're going to handle that responsibility. And some people handle it better than others. And some don't handle it very well at the start, and then they get better at it. And some handle it well to begin, and then they fall off. You don't know. I mean, think back to when you went to college. I think about when I went to college. I mean, come on. You put all that responsibility on me? You expect me to be responsible for my own actions? You expect me to be responsible for going to class and doing classwork? And I wasn't even a student athlete. I wasn't even spending all this time at football practice and basketball practice and all that. I mean, the flip side is I didn't have access to all the tutors and educational support and academic support that they have. But I didn't even have those responsibilities. Man, I was free to mess around as much as I wanted. And I think that part of the college experience applies to everyone, student athletes and regular students. And you can't project how a guy is going to handle that. I mean, you can have guys who do well in high school academically, and they get to college and they just can't handle that responsibility. They're just not up to it. They're not mature enough. And they may never be, or it might just take time for them to grow into it, and it might take too long to where they miss their opportunity at athletics. And it's a factor we don't really talk about at all when we try and project guys, probably because it's impossible to project how they're going to do. If a guy's really fast, we know he's going to be able to be fast in college. If a guy runs a 4.3 40, laser timed, we know he's going to be his speed is going to translate in college. If a guy's as strong as an ox, we know his strength will translate in college. We don't know how he's going to do in the classroom. And it's not just about is he smart enough. I think Pitt provides you with enough academic support that being smart enough is not the factor. It's about being responsible enough. It's about being mature enough. And that's the kind of thing we can never project. Why does a 5-star bust? There's a lot of reasons why 4-star busts and 5-star busts happen. There's a lot of reasons why those things happen. But at least part of it is that, they don't always adapt to the college experience as well as you need them to. Let's see here. Back to the comments for a few more. Nicholas Timperio. Does the lack of progression from Xavier Johnson and Trey McGowan from year 1 to year 2 concern you with the 3 freshmen this year? Is there a staff issue developing talent? At least Tony got somewhat better, he says. I don't know. Yeah, it's hard for me to gauge the impact of a coaching staff on the development of talent. The thing I've always said, and Nicholas, I know you're on the live streams and you all the time, and I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody who's on these live streams. It's great to have this kind of interaction and feedback. So Nicholas, you've been on these a lot of times. You probably heard me say I don't think that Johnson and McGowan's regressed as much as I think they just didn't improve. You know what I mean? I think they pretty much stayed the same from what they were a year ago, and that was the problem. You were counting on those guys to get better. You were expecting them to get better and counting on them to get better, and they just didn't. Is that on the staff? Is that on them? I don't know. I don't know. I think, like you said, Au'Diese Toney did improve. I think you saw Abdul Kareem Coulibaly from the start of the season to the end get better. I think Justin Champagnie improved as the season went on. We'll see what Johnson and McGowan's do in year 3. It's just tough, man. They started off at a really high level, but you saw the potential of where they could go. You saw areas where they could get better, and the fact that they didn't improve in those areas, is that on them or is that on the staff? I don't know. I have a hard time with deciding where to place that blame. And I think I would need a larger sample size too. You know what I mean? Go another 2 years with those guys, and then with the freshmen who just came in, and where's Champagnie in 2 years? Where's Coulibaly in 2 years? Where's Drumgoole in 2 years? I think there'll be a solid body of evidence for this staff in the next few years to make decisions on how they do with developing talent. Let's see. Robert Johnson, you can talk about fatigue, but poor post play and outside shooting really hurt the team. We started to see poor defensive breakdowns near the end of the year. Next year should see improvement with the freshmen. Yeah, I agree, Robert. I would say that some of the defensive breakdowns you could probably tie to fatigue. I think outside shooting you could tie to fatigue, dead legs, that kind of thing. Although this wasn't a great shooting team from the start. You know what I mean? That didn't necessarily happen down the stretch. The post play, was never really a factor. So, I mean, this team had built-in issues. You know what I mean? There's no question about it. This team had, it had talent issues in certain areas. But I don't think it was so talent deficient that it should have gone under 500 and only won 6 games in the ACC. I think they were talented enough to achieve more than that. I think they were talented enough to have more success than that. And I think there are a lot of factors why they didn't have that success. And I think in some of those games down the stretch, a Georgia Tech or a Syracuse, maybe fatigue was a factor. Maybe it was. I can't rule it out. I think there's something fair. I think there's a fair discussion to have. Let's see. Brock told me how to pronounce his last name. Let me see if I can find how he said to pronounce it. Madanik? Well, it's one of the others. I apologize, Brock. But Brock says Gerald Drumgoole, didn't Gerald Drumgoole excel during the offseason? If I'm not mistaken, he had a great overseas trip in Italy, scored 30 against Maryland in that scrimmage and 17 against Slippery Rock, and then he follows up. So Drumgoole showed a glimpse of what he could be during his first offseason. Hopefully he can have a bounce-back year. Yeah, I think there's a lot of talent there. I think Drumgoole has talent. I think we didn't see it. I think, like I say, between him just getting used to the college game and then being sidelined with that injury, I think you saw. I think it held him back. I want to give him a full year of being healthy and have a full year of college basketball under his belt, and then see what he can do and maybe render some new judgments next year. Let's see. S Mac, you got a question here. Are you buying into the Ethiel Horton hype? Have you seen him live? I have not seen him live. I've never seen the kid play in person in my life, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I know what to look for or what he looks like on the court. I think that they are hyping him a lot. You know what I mean? When you hear what Jeff Capel's saying, what the players are saying, there's a lot of hype rolling through about Ethiel Horton and what he's been doing during this year when he's sitting out after transferring from Delaware. And I mean, I hope they're right. I hope the hype is real. I hope he is that good, but there was one point where, Capel was comparing him to, he was there was this stretch there where Capel had a couple different comments where he said, he told the players that if they could guard Horton in practice, they could guard anybody in the ACC, and then later he's, Elijah Hughes, best scorer in the ACC, and they used Horton to mimic that role in practice. And, and it wasn't hard. That was what Capel said. It wasn't hard to prepare for Elijah Hughes because they have Ethiel Horton filling that role in practice. I mean, geez, you're kind of, I'm not going to say you're overhyping the guy, but boy, give him a chance to actually get on the court. You're almost setting him up to fail when you hype him that much. You're comparing him to in your words, the best scorer in the ACC, and you're putting a lot of pressure on him and setting the expectations pretty high for what he's going to be next season. Now, if he is all that, boy, the outlook on the season changes pretty considerably. Maybe they end up going, if you have all the guards back, again, with that caveat, and you go with 3 guards at times with Johnson, McGowens, and Horton playing together. Although I think more often you'll see, rotation of Johnson, McGowens, and Horton, or, because Horton, it seems like he could play either one of those 2 guard spots to go with Tony and Champagny and your center. But, yeah, I don't know what to make of that hype. Am I buying into it? I don't know. Jeff Capel doesn't seem to me to be the type of guy to overhype anything. So I'm inclined to believe him. I'm inclined to believe that he believes the things he's saying about Ethiopia Horton. Whether or not it's legit, I couldn't say. Because like I said, I haven't seen him. But we'll find out, hopefully, soon enough, in about 7, 8 months. Listen, go out and get some Elysian, all right? I don't know if you can get into your beer distributor where you'd like to go, or your six-pack shop. You might be able to pick up at the curb. But Elysian has the Contact Haze. It's a hazy IPA. It's good. Also, Goose Island, because we had 2 tonight. It's the Solo. If you need the low-calorie IPA during this pandemic, that's the way to go. If you need the hazy, check out some Elysian Contact Haze. Hazy IPA. Make sure you go to the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It is the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. We have coverage there all the time. You know what I mean? Just all day, every day we have coverage. We actually have some fun things coming up that I think you're going to kind of like. I'm looking forward to it. If nothing else, it'll be a conversation starter, and hopefully you enjoy checking it out. So make sure you check on the website on Wednesday. I think we're going to start an interesting feature, something I think is interesting. Hopefully you find it interesting as well. But of course, then there's message boards. We have the recruiting coverage. We got football breakdowns. We've got basketball breakdowns and recruiting coverage, and then message boards where you can interact. And we have this conversation here on the live stream, or you listen to this podcast, and it's me talking, for an hour. The message boards are all of us talking all day, every day. What better can you get? You're a Pitt fan. You want to talk with other Pitt fans about Pitt sports. Go on Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. And, all day, every day, there's a Pitt conversation going on. And then eventually you develop kind of like friends on the message board. It's a bit of a community. And then when something like a pandemic happens, you got a place to go, and you talk about that too. And it's not quite as toxic as Twitter. So that's our new tagline. It's our new tagline. Not quite as toxic as Twitter. Thanks so much for joining on the live stream. As always, everybody, I really appreciate it. It's great to have those conversations. Everybody who tuned in tonight, love the comments, love the questions, the interactions. Thanks for listening to the podcast. We'll still have a radio show Saturday morning, 8 a.m., Panthers Insider Show on 93.7 The Fan. And so tune into that. That's an hour of sports talk radio on 93.7 The Fan. So check that out. And then, of course, we'll be back next Tuesday night, 8:30, for another one of these live streams and podcasts. So thanks again for checking out the live stream. Thanks to everybody in the comments. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Be safe. Be healthy. Stay 6 feet away from your friends, and don't gather with more than 9 people, right? That's what we're all supposed to do until the rules change. Thanks again, everybody. Thanks for the comments. Thanks for checking out the live stream. We'll talk to you next week.